Hi, I'm Walker&Williams, and today we are having a look at lease options. What is a lease option? I'm about to explain to you, and in the next few minutes I hope you get this. I'm going to try and keep it really quite simple. If you want more detail and you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I read every one of them personally and I will come back to you. It's worth noting that I've been in property for 15 years now, give or take a couple of years, and I've done very, very well from property. And when I started my property journey really in 2008, just as the world was ending. So you'll remember on TV, people come out of Lehman Brothers carrying boxes full of their personal belongings. That was exactly about the time that I was looking to get into the property market. So the world was crashing, banks weren't lending, and I came across, through educating myself, lease options, grabbed onto it with two hands because I realized it was a way of acquiring property when the banks weren't lending at all, and if they were, you needed 30, 40, even sometimes 50% deposits, which it's just money I didn't have. So if you haven't got bags and bags of money, or even if you do, and you don't want to tie it up into one property, two properties, and you're trying to recycle your money and all that sort of thing, and you're looking to grow a substantial portfolio, or even if you've got no money and you're just looking to get your very first commercial sort of rental property, then lease options might be a very powerful way for you to do that. And I'm going to explain exactly how they work in a simple and hopefully easy way to understand. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Lease options. What is a lease option? Well, it's pretty much what it says on the tin. It's a lease. So if you've ever rented a property, which I'm sure you have, if you're sort of age and you know you've experienced life, then you will have rented property at some stage. So it's exactly the same thing, except with a residential lease, the landlord is responsible for all of the repairs and the insurance. On a commercial lease, which is what this is, you're responsible as the tenant for all of the commercial responsibilities and all of the repairs and the insurance. So for example, if you're living in a residential house with you and your partner and your kids or whatever, or just yourself, you're living in a flat, if the window breaks, smashes, you wake up in the morning and the window smashed, birds flies into it and it smashes, you call the landlord, you call the managing agent on behalf of the landlord, and they come and repair it at their expense. The boiler breaks, Christmas Day, they come out and repair it at their expense, their time, their effort. It's the opposite with a commercial lease. With most commercial leases, obviously every lease is different, but with most commercial leases, it's the opposite is true. So if Tesco's are renting a big shop off a landlord and somebody is drunk at night and throws a stone through the window, or a bird flies into the shop window and it smashes, same thing, Tesco's don't ring the landlord. Tesco's get the window repaired themselves. They repaint the lines on the car park, and they're responsible for insuring the building. So either the landlord will go and insure the building and Tesco's pay them back, or Tesco's go and get the insurance and they give the landlord a copy of the insurance, and the landlord has to be happy with that they have enough cover for damage. More than that, when a commercial tenant gives the property back, it has to be in the same or better condition than when they took it. So any work they do to it has to be put back. Okay, so this is more a commercial lease, okay, which is a disadvantage and an advantage, and I'll explain why in a second. So you're renting a property. It can be a flat, a house, a warehouse, office block. It can be a hotel. It can be anything at all. A field. You can have a lease option on a field. So it can be literally anything. So it's a lease, so you're renting something, for the purposes of this, let's just say a house. So you're renting a house and you have the option to purchase. So a lease with an option to purchase at a set price, usually, for an agreed amount of time. So as a real rough example, you have a 3-year lease for £1,000 a month. So £1,000 a month for 3 years, and you have the option, you have the right to buy the property for 100,000. So at the end of month 1 or at the end of month 36, you can buy the property for a set amount. Now I say usually set price because I have done lease options personally before, and I'm aware of other people who've done lease options where the price goes up ever so slightly year on year. So you have a 3-year lease, and year 1 you can buy it for 100, at year 2, beginning of year 2 to the end of year 2, you can buy it for 105. Beginning of year 3 to the end of year 3, when your lease option runs out, you can buy it for 110. So it goes up £5,000 every year. So it's usually a set price though. This studio is a lease option. So believe it or not, the building that we're in, if you follow me on YouTube, you'll know that I've done other videos. I'll put a link in the description below to a video I've just done of a tour of the building that I'm recording this in. So we've turned this room, this office room, into a studio, but the rest of it is 21,000 square feet of office spaces. This building is a lease option. I'm coming to you live from a lease option. So what was the deal on this particular building? It was £1,000 per calendar month with an option to buy within 2 years. So we pay £1,000 per month, or we pay, I think on this one it's 385,000. So every month we go to the landlord and we say there's £1,000, or we say there's 385,000 we own the building. We have 2 years to buy it, so we have 24 months, and that's the deal. So we pay £1,000 for the rent, and we also pay a couple £100 a month for the insurance. So all in, it costs us about £1,300 a month, and every month we pay the £1,300, and we have 24 months to buy the building, or at the end of the 24 months we can either renegotiate the lease, or the landlord can say get out, or we can walk away. Right, okay, so what's in it for you, you at home who are thinking of doing a lease option, i.e. me, what's in it for the landlord? Okay, it's good for me because early access. So it's far, far quicker to get into a property, generally speaking, unless you're buying with cash or with a bridging finance company that you've got a really good relationship with, because some of them are slow, even though they're bridging finance. Generally, they're slower unless you've got cash than renting. So you can get in a lot quicker with the lease option. Add value. So you have the opportunity to add value to the building before you buy it. So let's say, for example, you might say, okay, there's a particular house, I know my area really well, I know that this house is a little bit undervalued, but there is some work involved, which is maybe why it hasn't sold. You know, there's some subsidence, but my sister's boyfriend owns a piling company, and you've sort of got an angle on it, and you know a way of spending, say, £20,000 to add £50,000 worth of value. You can add that value before you have to buy the building. So let's say, for example, compare it to the normal route of acquiring a property. You go to your local area, you see a house that you think is good value for money. It's worth 150 and it's on the market for 120 because it needs 30 grand spending on it. But you can do that 30 grand's worth of work for 10 grand and you've only got 10 grand to spend. But if you have to buy the property, you've got to use 10 grand plus a bit more to buy it. Then you've bought it, you've got the keys, you've got no more money to do the work to get it up so you can rent it, sell it, flip it, whatever you want to do. So you can only buy it or renovate it. You can't afford to do both because you can only spend the deposit money once. With a lease option, you can acquire the property through the lease option, so you now have the keys, you can spend money on it, you can work on it like it's your own property, you know, it's all negotiable in the contract. Some lease options, the landlords try and say you can't do anything to the property until you buy it. But you can negotiate, and most people take a sensible view. Look, if I'm going to spend money underpinning your house that we all agree is subsiding and needs work doing to it, why would you not want me to spend that money? Some people, I've dealt with, have said you cannot, under no circumstances can you spend money on the property until you buy it. Some people say you can, but I'm a control freak, and a lot of these people can be put into this category. You can convince them and say, look, don't be, most things are fear, so don't be afraid, don't be scared, I'm not going to trash the house. All I want to do is underpin it. Here's the company I'm going to use. Here are their credentials. Come and meet the guys. Come and see a project they've done before. And then you can get them comfortable with, they're not cowboys. I'm not going to be cutting corners. I'm not going to be destroying your property. I'm going to be using real people to do a really good job on your property. If I don't end up buying it, you get the benefit of all the good work. So you can add the value. So once you've spent, you see, you've only got this 10 grand, 20 grand, whatever it may be, rather than use that for a deposit, you use that to do the house up, so the house is now immaculate and ready to rent out. The value that you've added to that is your deposit. So that money has not only been spent on making the property good, ready to rent out, it's also increased the value of that property, which is then your deposit for the purchase. So you get to use the money once, twice, if you see what I mean. Whereas if you just use it to buy it, you haven't got it to then renovate it. Rent for more, ? So sometimes you can do a lease option, and I've done this before. There was one in Blackpool. There was a 3,500 square foot warehouse in Blackpool, and we needed some space for a vending machine company that I had at the time. And so I did a deal with a chap, and I said, look, I'll rent it for £1,000 a month, and I have the option to buy it for 180,000. for 5 years. He said, yeah, no problem. We shook hands, we did the deal. I split the warehouse into two. I had one half because I didn't need all of it. And I rented out the other half for £1,000. So my half actually cost me nothing because I was renting the whole building for £1,000 and I rented out half of it to somebody else. I did it up a little bit, not loads, painted it, all new lights. I took out all the halogen lights that were expensive to run. I replaced them with the LED lights, but nothing major. The toilet was knackered. It was horrible. I replaced that for them. New basin, new toilet, painted the place up, made it look pretty, and I rented it was actually a little over half, it was about 60% for £1,000, so my half was free. And then when that business grew, it moved out to new premises, and then I rented that section out also for £1,000. Again, painted it, touched it up. So I was renting two halves out for £1,000 each, and only giving £1,000 to the building. So I was actually making £1,000, which went towards the deposit to buy it. So you can sometimes rent them for more. This building would be an example. We're currently, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that we've just had a new front door go in because the reception's too big for what we need. So we've split it, and then we're going to rent part of the reception out, hopefully to somebody who wants a shop in Preston on the busy high street. So we'll rent the shop out. If we can rent a few of the offices out that we don't need ourselves, then we might be able to break even, so we have our offices for free, or even make a little bit of money. So we're actually making money. We've got our offices for free, and we're making money. 100% finance. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I said add value. So 100% finance doesn't exist, and that's probably a good thing to be quite honest. However, it does in one form. And what I mean by that is with these offices, let's say, for example, just make the numbers easy, £400,000 to buy it, okay? And so for that, I need a 20% deposit, for example, and I need 80,000. I can either give that 80,000 to the bank and then they give me the rest and I buy the property, or I can spend the 80,000 on the building, fill it full of people paying lots of rent, lots of lovely rent, and then go to the bank and say, look, rather than an empty building, there's my 80 grand deposit. I can say there's a full building making loads of money, get it revalued. They come out and say, okay, it's not worth 400, it's worth 550. With the rent roll you've got and the decent people and the paint and the niceness you've done, it's worth, and this beautiful film studio, it's worth 550. I say to the bank, okay, well, I've got an option to buy it for 400. They put in the 400, the 550 equity is my deposit, and away I go. So I've got a nice building done up and I bought it. So that's what I mean by 100% finance, because the bank will finance it. I've actually done 2 deals before where not only did I spent the money on the property, they're in such bad condition that I was really lucky and really clever in the way I added value. And I ended up actually getting a little bit of money back. So I got the building for free. I got I rented out for more than I was renting it. So I got income for the rental period. Then I bought it, and when I bought it, so much time had passed because it was quite a long lease option. So much time had passed, just naturally the property market prices had increased, and it was a fixed price. It was a set price. It didn't matter when I did it, when I exercised the option. That I actually got some money back. So I got all my renovation money back, and I got a little bit on top, and I got to own the property. So really, really good deal. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, by the way, get in touch and I can give you some actual real life examples with real full addresses. Okay, freedom to walk away. So if, for example, you watch my other videos and you're into H-bar, let's say, for example, we wake up tomorrow morning and H-bar's worth £100 a coin. With 500,000 coins, I'm worth £50 million. Am I still going to be messing about with a small little office, a 3-bed semi-detached house? Maybe not. So maybe I want to walk away. Maybe it's something bad and it's ill health. Maybe the market takes a turn for a worst. Maybe your financial circumstances change for some reason. Maybe you're doing this as a side hustle and you get an amazing promotion, but it means you've got to move from Blackburn, where you live, to London, or from London to Edinburgh, and all of a sudden, actually, this property around the corner doesn't make any sense, and you want to walk away. You've got the option. See, that's the beauty of this. You've got the option, but not the obligation to buy it. You have the option to buy it. You don't have to. So if next door a sewerage work opens up and the house, you've got an option to buy it for 100 and now it's worth 10, you can just walk away. So really good. Donald Trump, whether you love him or hate him, doesn't really matter, but you can't deny the guy's done well financially, and that's what this is really about. And he said, control everything, own nothing. So you have all of the benefit of owning property or whatever else it may be, but you don't have any of the burden. You can just walk away. Inflation on your side, you know I'm big on inflation. Inflation is the difference between rich and poor people in general. Obviously there's other things that involved, but generally speaking, if you take a group of wealthy people and you take a group of not wealthy people, generally one either understand inflation and play the game, play the rules of the game, and the other don't, or if they don't know inflation, by accident they're playing the game without knowing it. So inflation is on your side. If you want to know more about inflation, by the way, I've created another video talking about inflation, and I'll put a link to that video in the description below too. So inflation is on your side. What do I mean? Every year, money is worth less and less. Every year, people think that things are getting more expensive, and they are. But it's not because the prices are rising. It's because, well, they are rising, but it's because you need more money. The money is worth less. So if a pound is worth £1 now, and you come back tomorrow and a pound's worth 90p, to buy the same thing, you've got to give me more of it. So you've got to give me £1.10 to get the same value. So money is worth less and less. So if you have a set price and you can buy a house for £100,000 and inflation is at 10%, which it isn't, but let's say inflation is at 10% to make the numbers easier, next year that £100,000 is only worth 90. And then the year after that, it's only worth 81, and so on and so forth. So it's dropping by 10% every year. And so inflation is on your side. Okay, but any good deal has got something in it for both parties. I don't particularly like or believe in, it's not sustainable to do deals where only one side wins, because it's not a deal, it's I don't know what you call it, but it's not what I would call a deal. Okay, so it's good for seller because instant problem solved. So you might be thinking, Max, I've watched your office tour video. The office is massive, 21,000 square feet, and you're only paying £1,000 a month. Yeah, but hang on a second. The building being so big is good if you've got use for it, but if you haven't, it's a nightmare. Rates are crippling. Council tax if it's a house, but rates if it's not. And by the way, after you have now the laws changed to get properties moving, which I think is a good thing. If a property, residential or commercial, is empty for 6 months, you get 6 months free. After that, it doubles. I don't know if that's true with council tax. It might be 50%, and it depends on the area. With business rates, it definitely is true. So if business rates are 10 grand for an occupied property, once it's been empty for 6 months, it's not 10 grand, it's 20 grand, it doubles. So, and on a building of this size, believe me, it can be crippling. So what else can be a problem? Well, you might have had an empty property yourself. You'll know that you sometimes lay awake at night thinking, Christ, has anyone broken in? I've heard horror stories of squatters breaking in and trashing everything, stealing all the copper wire, whatever. All of that is taken away if the minute the lease option. So the minute I sign on the lease and I take possession of the property, it's no longer the landlord's problem. If somebody breaks into this building tonight, I mean, they'd have their work cut out because we're connected to the police with the alarms and the CCTV and everything else. But if somebody broke into this building tonight, then it's my problem. I wouldn't even bother ringing the landlord. I mean, I might out of a courtesy because I know them personally, but you wouldn't have to. Tesco's don't ring the landlord every time they have a burglary. It doesn't happen. Weatherspoons, so on and so forth. Every time there's a crime in the building, they don't ring the landlord. So instant problem solved. All of that headache, all of that concern, all that worry, flood, fire, just an accident, not even people breaking in, just the building catching fire. All of those problems are instantly solved. Instant cash flow. So if, as a landlord, you are desperate for money, or you're not desperate for money at all, both appeal because it's cash in your back pocket. If you need that money desperately, it happens a lot quicker because it's early access and I pay the rent monthly up front. But that can be negotiated, of course. And if you don't need the money and you don't need the big bucks, it's nice to have that money coming in straight away on top of the purchase price if the person buys it. So it's instant cash flow, which is always a great thing. I've never heard anybody say they don't like cash flow. Property improved at no cost to the landlord. So again, if taking the house that's worth 150 but is currently on the market for 130 and needs 10 spending on it or whatever, if I get that subsidence problem, or if I get that extension built, or if I put en suites in all the bedrooms and I turn it into a HMO or whatever, if I do that and that H-bar's worth 100 quid and 50 million, I'm worth 500 million and I walk away, all of the benefit of my work goes back to the landlord. So the landlord gets the keys back and a newly renovated property. So what a great thing. Property improved at no cost to them. It's still their property, don't forget. This is, you're renting it with the option to buy it. You do not own this property. The vendor, the owner, the seller, they still own it. So if you don't, or if you run out of time, I've heard horror stories where people haven't given themselves enough time. Something's gone wrong, ill health, COVID. I was, in intensive care for 11 days. So something happens and it just means that you don't complete in time. If you haven't got a good rapport with the landlord, or even if you do and the guy just says, or girl says, sorry, tough luck, business is business, I think one of the worst sayings in the world, sorry, and takes the keys back off you, they've got all your hard work. Sale at a higher price, ? So sometimes one of the ways of getting a good deal over the line is to say to a landlord, or a seller, to say to a seller, look, the house is worth 150, give me 3 years to pay, and on top of giving you £1,000 a month, I'll also give you 180. And the landlord might say, well, bloody hell. Back in 2008, 2009, that was a really big deal. And it was a really big deal because, less so at the moment, but at the time, because property prices dropped so sharply and so far, a lot of people were in negative equity. So what that meant is they couldn't afford to make the payments on the property. So some people were in arrears, 2, 3, 4, 6 months arrears with the bank. And they couldn't sell it because it was worth 100 and they owed the bank 150. So if they sold it, they actually crystallized the problem. They made it worse because then they didn't have the property and they still owed the bank 50,000 quid. So what do you do? Well, I was saying to people, okay, the property at the moment is worth 120. That's what you'd get if you sold it on the open market. Best case, 120. You owe 150. Give me 5 years to pay. I'll give you £1,000 a month. Give me 5 years to pay. And within that period, I'll give you 155. So rather than crystallizing between a 30 and a £50,000 loss today, forget about it. I'll pay off your arrears, so you're not in arrears with the bank anymore, or you pay half and I'll pay half the arrears, or whatever, or you chip away at the arrears and I'll just make the payments moving forward, whatever's negotiated. And not only that, so we'll repair your credit file. At some point, you will get a £5,000 from the sale. So rather than selling it and crystallizing a £50,000 loss and still owing the bank 50 grand and having your credit file ruined, we won't have any of that. I'll pay you £5,000. You might have to wait 5 years, but who cares? Because the alternative is far worse. I'll pay you £5,000, and in the meantime, I'll pay your mortgage, or if your mortgage is 500, I'll give your mortgage 500, and I'll give you 500. So black and white, it was genuinely. I had people crying and thanking me for saving them. So that's genuine, true. I can introduce you to people. Okay, sale at higher price, ? Might get property back improved. So, I don't want to bore you. I've put their property improved at no cost to them. So that's exactly what I said before. You win the lottery, you change your mind, you fall in love, you get promoted, move to a different country, you die, ill health, you don't perform, you can't commit, the bank won't deal with you, you go to prison, whatever it may be, and they get the property back with all the work done for them. So that's what's in it for the seller, and this is what's in it for you. Before I'd done a lease option, one of the first and biggest questions I kept asking myself was, where am I going to find a lease option though? Where do you find these people who are willing to rent their property? So they're everywhere. So every property to rent on Rightmove is a lease option. I would bet serious money with you that 99.99999% of the properties on Rightmove right now, tonight, to rent are lease options. The landlords just don't know it. And try it for yourself. It doesn't matter whether you pick a house in Edinburgh or in London, whether it's to rent for 300 quid a month or 50 grand a month. If you rung up the estate agent and you said, hello, I'm looking to rent the property in Edinburgh. I believe the rent's £500 a month. Yes, that's true. Yeah, I'd like to take it and I'd like to sign a 3-year lease. I'm happy to pay £500 a month. However, how much is the property worth for sale? Well, it's not for sale. No, I get that, but if it were for sale, how much is it? I'm looking to buy, but I want to rent first. How much would this property be on the market for? Oh, well, we sold one 3 doors down for £300,000. Okay, could you ask the landlord, if I rent this for 3 years and I pay £500, which is what they're asking for, and you tell them, and you've told me that you think the property's worth, £300,000, could I buy it for £1 million? But I want 3 years to decide. I would be amazed. Now, you might have to provide proof of funds. You might have to convince the estate agent that you're not mental. But the point is, you get my point, I hope, which is, it's not a question of, is this property a lease option? It definitely is. Can you get it for the price that makes sense? And obviously, if buying a £300,000 house, unless you're a big genius, better than me, and you can find a way to add more than £700,000 worth of value to this £300,000 house, clearly £1 million on a £300,000 house doesn't make any sense. But you get my point. The landlord would say, if the landlord's got any brains at all, the landlord would say, so I'm going to rent my house to you for full ask, which is £500 a month. You're going to take it for 3 years. And in those 3 years, at the end of those 3 years, you either give me the keys back and move on like a normal tenant, or you're going to give me £1 million for a house that I think is worth 300. Yeah, that's not a problem. I will give you that option. You've then got a lease option. You've got a lease with an option. Now, clearly £1 million for £300,000 house doesn't make any sense. So, but would the landlord do it for 500,000? Yeah, they probably would. Would they do it for 400,000? Well, maybe, but there's tax to pay, and that's how it starts. You plant that seed, and that's how it starts. Maybe don't start at £1 million because it's a long way to bring them down. But you get my point. So your house right now, wherever you're watching this video, if I said to you, can I rent it, and you were moving on and you were going to rent it out, and you were going to rent it for £1,000, and I said to you, we both know that your house is worth 250. Can I rent it for 1,000? But let me for 2 years, and in those 2 years, I'll either pay you rent or I'll give you the 250 that we both know your house is worth plus an extra 50. You'd go, yeah, okay. Well, if I can add more than 50 grand's worth of value, I've just locked in a deal. Or I think the property market's going to boom. A great example of that is Morecambe, for example. Just north of us, they're now talking about the Eden project in Morecambe. If it gets planning, if it goes ahead, all the property prices overnight are going to jump by 20, 30, 40, 50, 100%. In fact, prices in Morecambe have already doubled once in the last very recent couple of years. So if you'd had a lease option in Morecambe 3 years ago, this is more speculation unless you can get an inside track. But if you had a crystal ball and you knew the Eden project was going to go ahead, you could secure a load of properties, you could rent them for 500, rent them out for 500 so they're not costing you anything, and just sit on them with the option to buy for 100. Eden project lands, you could sell all of those lease options without even buying the properties to someone like me for 200,000 and make £100,000. You never even owned the property. You just sat in the middle of a deal. That Eden project is very unique, but in London they've got new train stations opening all the time for the underground, for the tube. So if you get early info and you keep your eye on the ball, and you know that actually there's a tube station going to be opening there, which means the property price is going to double. You do lease options today. You hopefully make a little bit of money every month off the lease by renting out to somebody else. Make sure you can do that in the contract, by the way. Otherwise, you're in breach of contract and could actually lose the property. So make sure you put that in the contract. You can actually make a positive cash flow, make a couple £100 a month, and then when the tube station opens and all the property prices double, you could just buy the property and then sell it, back to back it, or you could just sell somebody else the lease option and say, look, in the contract it says I have the right to sell this to somebody else. Okay, so what you need trust. It's very, very important. This is very much people-to-people deal. This is not you buying a house on Rightmove through an estate agent of people you never meet. Commercial solicitors who deal with commercial property and commercial transactions are far better versed in this. And although this is new to most people like you and I, actually in the commercial world, this is the norm. And a lease without an option is not the norm. So a lease with an option, for example, Wetherspoons will not take a lease on. They won't rent the building off you unless you give them an option to purchase. Why? Because in commercial property, generally it says every 5 years, there's an upward only rent review. So it says at the end of 5 years, you either give the keys back if there's a break, or you stay where you are, but the rent goes up. It can't go down, it can only go up. It can stay the same if both parties agree, but generally it only goes up. That's to cover for inflation, the wealth killer. And because the landlord and the tenant have a much better idea of what the business is doing. Because until they move in, you can do all the tests, all the studies, all the clipboard checking and stuff you like. But until you actually put your business in that place, open the doors, you don't know if customers are going to come in. I don't care if you're Apple, Sainsbury's. There was a Sainsbury's in Southport, it closed. They got it wrong. So until you move in, you don't know if it's going to be a success. At the end of 5 years, you might say, well, bloody hell, they're flying. So Wetherspoons know when they move into a property, if they do £1 million a week, at the end of those 5 years, guess what? Max is going to be saying, hi guys, listen, I know you're doing great guns. I've seen the company accounts. I know the footfall. I drink in there on a Saturday with the football. You guys are doing £1 million a week. Now your rent was £2 grand a week. I want 10 grand a week. Now, if they didn't have an option to purchase or anywhere else to go, they might be stuck and go, oh, well, bloody hell, we don't want to lose the business because we are doing £1 million a week and he's only asking 10 grand. But that means that the rent's gone up 5 times. So to prevent that, Wetherspoons, who are very smart, and Tesco's and a lot of these other guys have an option to purchase. So they move into a place, they've got an option to purchase for £1 million. After year 2, they're doing £1 million a week. They can buy it for a week's wages. So most commercial places have a lease with an option. If you get a solicitor, that's a bigger practice, a bigger firm. My solicitors are great, and if you want to use them, let me know in the comments below and I can introduce you. And they do commercial stuff, so they know exactly. You go and then you say, hi, I've got a lease option. They'll know exactly what you're saying. Okay, what are the terms? What's the rent? What's the option? So on and so forth. By the way, this is another thing to say about a good solicitor. It's not just them understanding and knowing what a lease option is. It's them reading the small print, that it is definitely an option. You don't have to exercise it. Everything is important for people to understand. And a lot of people, loads of people, educated people that I deal with, it surprises me. They don't understand that in a contract, it can say anything you and I want it to, as long as it's legal and fair. So if I said you're going to come and rent an office, you've seen the YouTube's video, you want to rent an office, great, come on in, and I want to pay 1 bag of weed a week. We cannot put that into a legally binding contract. Even if I agreed, I said, yep, that's fine. I've always wanted to try the wacky backy. I'll rent you this office room for 1 bag of marijuana a week. We couldn't put that into a contract that would be legally binding because it's illegal. But if you said, I said to you, okay, you've got 2 options. You can rent the office off me. It's £100 a week, or it's £50 a week if you come and pay it in cash dressed as a chicken. If you agree to that, that then becomes a legally binding contract. There's nothing wrong. And if you don't perform, I can sue you for breach of contract, I can kick you out of the property, or whatever it may be. So if we both agree it's fair and it's legal, then it's legally binding. So you could say, for example, it's a 5-year lease option, there's no payments. In fact, you've got to pay me every month to look after the property, and there's an option to buy it. Year 1's £1 million, year 2's 300 grand, year 3 is 5 red roses, year 4 is a chicken, and year 5 is £16 million. If you both agree, it's crazy, but it's legal, there's nothing illegal about it. You both sign it, it's legally binding. That's it, that's what you got to do. So having a good solicitor means that one, he can suggest things that are clever, that help you, and also look out for tricks that people might be trying to do to trip you up. Okay, a clear set of HOTs. What are HOTs? Heads of terms. Really, really important. When you're agreeing a deal, what I've just discussed there is the heads of terms. So forget the nitty-gritty solicitor talk that's, in my opinion, a load of nonsense that they just employ to keep each other employed. The heads of terms are the basic, raw, core information. How much, for how long, what's the address, who are you, who am I, what are my rights, is it an option or do I have to buy it? What are the penalties if I don't buy it? Maybe none. What are the penalties if the seller doesn't sell it? Flat refuses to sell it. So, and the heads of terms, now they should be 10, 15, literally couple of sentence bullet points, and that's the heads of terms. Make sure that you have a clear set of heads of terms written down, preferably in text or email between you and the seller, landlord, vendor, whatever, if you're dealing direct. And then you pass that to your solicitor and you say, these are the heads of terms, this is what's been agreed. The lease is 3 years, the rent's £1,000 a month, the purchase price is £1 million. I can make changes to the property, I can add value, I get early access, and so on and so forth. If, for example, your solicitor's not that switched on and he doesn't check the small print and their solicitor puts in you can't do any work without their express permission and you've got to pay them £1,000 for every change you make. And then you come to do the property and the only way you're going to be able to buy it is if you spend your money once, and that's doing it up to add the value that I talked about earlier, and then you come to read the small print and you can't. You're stuck. So it's really, really important you have a good solicitor. It's really, really important you have a clear set of heads of terms so you know where you stand. And then the last point of what you need, it's a lot easier. Estate agents take your time. What do I mean? Estate agents, love them, hate them, whatever, they're human beings. In my experience, most estate agents are very set in their ways. They either stand on this side of the office renting property, and that's it. You rent property, you rent property, you rent property, and that's all they know, okay? That's the rent property. They're hammers and everything looks like nails, okay? And then you have this side of the office in the estate agents, if they do both, sales and lettings, and these are sales. And they're drills and everything looks like screws. Sales, sales, sales. You sell, I sell, I sell. You want to buy? Come see me. You want to rent? Go see him. Two different departments, nothing to do with each other. Our paths never cross. Except on the rare occasion, we have a landlord who's a renter and decides to sell his portfolio and they pass it over. But once it comes over, it's done, clean cut, that's it. And estate agents really, 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 really struggle to understand a lease with an option. But bear with them, take your time. And I've put here, take your time. Don't go bouncing to the estate agents with all that enthusiasm and put them off and confuse them and embarrass them. I've had estate agents say it's illegal, lease options are illegal. It's impossible. And I was young and enthusiastic and arrogant and I thought I could teach everyone and they'd just listen and it was obvious and if I got it in a first go, then you should too. And I bounced into estate agents and I alienated them completely. Big mistake. Now, I know all my local agents, but if I was approaching a new area, I'd go into the estate agents and I would say, have you got anything to rent? I'm looking for rent. This is the area I'm looking for. This is my budget and so on and so forth. And then say, have you got any landlords that are a bit tired or who might be looking to sell? Or do you have any properties that the landlord's inquired about selling? Or do you have any properties that are for rent? And are in the sale window too. That's rare, but it can happen. They go, yeah, this one's to rent. But just so you know, he's only doing 6-month tenancies because he's also got it for sale. They're doing a lease option and they don't even know it. But that's what they're doing. You can only have a 6-month tenancy. You might have heard that. You can only have a 6-month tenancy because it is on the open market. Full transparency. Oh, by the way, it's not on the open market, but the landlord is considering selling. So you can take it, but it's only a 3-month rolling contract. It's a lease option. So take your time with estate agents. They are gentle creatures. You've got to talk to them slowly, get them to understand. And of course, I'm being a bit flippant. Everyone's different. There's good people in industries. There's bad people. There's thick people. There's bright people in every industry. And their industry is no different. But my personal experience is it takes a lot of hand-holding and a lot of explaining to get them to understand that these two departments actually can be together. But they have all the properties. Not all, but they have a lot of the properties. So they're good people to know. Get them on side, make them part of your team. Take your time with them. Do not go bouncing in the shop, kick the door off the hinges and go, guess what? I'm here. I've come to save the day. Okay, so that's about it, guys. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I will answer them personally. I hope this has been helpful. I hope if this is the first time you've ever heard of this concept, I hope you're as excited as I was when I first heard it. Loads of information on the internet. Be very careful in property. There's a lot of sharks in property and there's a lot of people teaching stuff having never done it themselves before or even worse, failed. I actually know people by name who have tried in property for a year or two, for whatever reason it hasn't worked, it's failed completely and they've thought, well, I've got all this knowledge, I can't actually do it in person for whatever reason or in practice, or I've got my fingers burnt or whatever, it went wrong for me, I'll cover over all that, paint over all of that and I'll just teach it to people. Which is fine, they might be good teachers, they say those who can't do teach, and they might be good teachers. But have they got the life experience, and be careful because when you ask questions, what should I do about this really unique set of circumstances? This house needs an underpinning, but I'm getting really close to my option. Should I exercise my option, then do the work, or do the work, then exercise the option? They're guessing. They don't know because they've never done anything like that before. They have no personal experience. It's like a tour guide who's never been to the country they're telling you about. They've read all the books, they've watched all the videos, they can tell you everything there is to know about Italy, but they've never actually been there themselves. So they can't tell you what it smells like. They can't tell you what it sounds like. They can't tell you what it feels like to be there in person because they've never been. So just be very careful. The property industry is full of sharks, more than a lot of other industries. So be really careful out there, guys. Protect your wealth. Your time and your money is so important. Okay, thanks ever so much for watching. See you again soon.